Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Spectrum of Hurdles. I'm Shane.
And I'm Ed.
Yep, and today we have a very special guest, Miss Kari Baker, the founder and CEO of KiND Families out in Phoenix, Arizona. Hi, Kari. How are you?
Hi, Shane. Hi, Ed. It's great to see you again.
Yes, and for those of you that don't know, I actually met Miss Kari at a conference in Atlanta, Georgia, a couple weeks ago called the Together Conference, and I immediately was hooked into her story, her son's journey, and what they're trying to accomplish in this life. So would you mind telling everybody what you're about?
Sure. So, for about 30 years, I was a financial consultant. So everything that we're talking about today just kind of came about a couple of years ago. But I founded an organization called KiND Families, and KiND stands for Kids with Invisible Neurological Differences. And it was really born out of my life experience as a mom. So my son, Brady, who's my only son, was diagnosed with autism when he was 3. And then later ADHD, and then a couple, what I like to call a couple other acronyms that are ingredients in his neurological soup. And it was a process for me to really kind of understand how his brain worked. It was a process for me to accept that this kind of traditional parenting path I thought I was going to be on was going to look very different. But eventually, through faith and really just embracing who my son is, started feeling pulled away from the financial services world and really just wanted to help people understand that we are all made on purpose for a purpose, and God doesn't make mistakes, and we need to embrace who God made us to be and be able to really, explore and nurture those gifts and talents that we all have to be able to honor God and ourselves and our children. And so Brady is 14 now. He was diagnosed at 3. He's 14. And I wrote a book about our experiences, and the whole last section is just really cool things that Brady accomplished and ways that he's impacted other people. And even now, now that the book came out in October, and I could write a whole other book about all the other things that he's doing to surprise us. He's going to be a movie director. He's got a movie that he's putting together right now, and beautiful photography eye. And so, we just KiND Families through speaking, and then the KiND Families podcast, which I also host and have guests come and talk about neurodiversity and faith and other things. And then just speaking engagements and encouraging parents and providers and people to embrace each other for our differences, not in spite of our differences. So
I'm glad you said that about faith. I am Mormon myself, and Jesus Christ, God has helped me a lot in my strength going forward, and it's good to see you embracing that. Not all people believe, which is fine. We all should have something we do believe in, whether it be our own self, whether it be anything, whatever can push us forward, we should always have faith. One thing we like to really push up in our company is we're all different generations. I'm almost 60 years old. Shane is in his 30s. And you said you're youngsters in his teens. What do you feel are the differences between mentoring someone his age to teaching someone who was 30 to teaching someone who was 60?
Oh, wow. Well, right now I'm kind of in it's a hard balance, because for so long we've been focused on, preparing him to be in the world. And there's a lot of, control, I would say, for lack of a better word, that we've exerted over him to, protect him and to, get him skilled to the point where we were comfortable with him being out there. Well, now he's 14, and now we're in this process of letting go of him and letting him be independent in certain things that, that are safe, and some things that I don't feel safe to me as a mom, but we still need to let him do because he's growing older, so it's a process of picking our battles and the things that we think we need to still, parent him over, and the other things that we need to just let him explore on his own. So, I think that it also might be different for the generations like you're talking about. For somebody in their 30s, what I'm facing or hearing a lot about now are folks that either have, traumatic events that happen that change their neurological makeup, and are having to adjust to that as an adult, or are just getting diagnosed as an adult, and have really struggled their whole life, not knowing why they were different or why they weren't able to relate to people in the same way as their classmates and those kinds of things.
Exactly.
So that's a nuance to it that I think is really exploding right now, because there were not as many ways to get information and to be diagnosed 20 years ago as there are today. So I think in those cases, I think there's a lot of work that just needs to be done on your identity. Like you were saying, Ed, there's got to be something that you believe in and some purpose that drives you out there. And if you think your purpose and your identity is wrapped up in something that other people consider to be a disability or a difference, it's going to make it really hard for you to, have pride in yourself and be able to fulfill all the purposes that you were put on this planet to fulfill. So, I don't know what Brady's going to be like in his 20s and his 30s. But I hope that there's always going to be people out there advocating for him, and that he is prepared to advocate for himself. One of the things that's been really cool, the people that I've been able to meet through this journey, I've met a lot of folks working in corporate America to change the way that job interviews are done, to change the way that they supervise employees, to change the way that they structure jobs, and in a way that is going to allow neurodiverse people to be productive and to be successful. And that's kind of exciting. And that's really kind of a whole new world that my son is going to be able to benefit from when he's, in his 20s and out there looking for a job. So
I'm glad you said that. One of the other things we also like to push a lot is there's a myth out there that we want to be treated just like everybody else. And that's not true. If we're treated like everybody else, we're going to die. We can do what anybody else can, but we need help. We need some different assistance. We can do anything. But if we're treated just the same way as a normal person, it's hard. We get overloaded. Right. And one other thing that really hit with you was talk about your parenting skills. Both me and Shane lost our parents at a young age. Shane definitely, he was in his teens and he lost his parents. I lost when I was in my 30s. What advice do you give for somebody who really doesn't have either lost their parents or have parents who aren't there for them? What advice would you give to those people?
Well, you can find community in a lot of places. And I think that for me, I did not really have a faith when we started our KiND journey, but as my faith grew and as I started digging deeper into who God is and all of the things that go along with him, I was able to be mentored by a lot of folks in the church, a lot of women in the church who had gone before me and had a deeper understanding. And so I think, finding a community, whether it's in your church, whether there's an organization, mentorship programs that are out there, they don't necessarily have to be blood relatives. I unfortunately know a lot of people who have parents, but they haven't been great parents. They haven't been supportive parents. They haven't done the things that may have helped their children grow and thrive better as an adult. But they are finding folks in the community, whether it's their doctors or their providers or, the school system does, the school system by nature has a community of folks that are needing different kinds of assistance. And those parents within that system want to reach out to other kids. So, I think that the worst thing you can do in any situation, any challenge you go through, the worst thing you can do is isolate yourself and try to reconcile that you're the only person on the planet that's ever gone through this. There are always folks out there who are walking a path that might not be exactly like yours, but that are similar. And the best thing you can do is find that community. And, nowadays it really wasn't prevalent when Brady was diagnosed, but there are, Facebook pages, and there are, online communities, and there are Zoom, support groups that you can go to. And so I just encourage, wherever that place is where you can feel like you have a home and you have support, to just douse yourself in that. And, there are people out there who love you and want to help you understand who you are. And so, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Because with me, when I lost my father after my mother died, my family flew down, my blood relatives flew down from New York, which is where everybody is from, and they were only here temporarily. And they really didn't know what to do when my father was dying and after he passed away. It was like, well, what was going to happen to me? Where was I going to go? Foster care system, all that fun stuff, right? But thankfully, with the power of community, like the people in my school, my guidance counselors, my friends in school, because I just started high school. So that was kind of like a double whammy. I'm like a whole new world of high school, and now I'm being thrust into the world of not having any parents. Like, whoa. But yeah, and thank God I am with a organization called UCF CARD, the Center for Autism Related Disabilities. I'm not sure if you've heard of them.
I've heard of CARD. I don't know if it's the same one, but I think we have one out here. So
okay. Yeah, I'm not sure if it's the same one, but yeah, being through that whole community, I'm able to live independently, and they taught me the skills I needed to know to, really live my best life and to be independent.
Right.
I have a question. Being older now, when I was younger, we didn't really know what autism was. One thing, though, I had to overcome a lot was bullying. They thought I was just slow. They thought I was. Now, there's two sides to this story. One, with the knowledge now people have of autism, I would think the bullying would be less because people have more of an understanding. However, we also didn't have internet when I was younger. And with the internet, I could see a stronger sense of bullying. Do you see, does your son have any instances of bullying in his life, and how can people on the spectrum basically handle it?
Unfortunately, yes. And it really, I will say that in his younger years, elementary school years, I think the kids just kind of saw him as Brady, but middle school started getting really hard in middle school. And the kids that he thought were his friends, I guess, were all going through their process of trying to figure out who they wanted to be. And they literally started using the word autism or autistic as a slur or as a slam against him. So when something was weird, they would say, "Oh, that's so autistic," or make up songs on the playground about autism. And it was so painful because it took him a long time to understand social relationships like that with his peers. So there was some stuff that kind of more minor things that happened in elementary school, but it just went right over his head. He did not understand it emotionally to the point where it caused him pain. But once he got to middle school, he absolutely understood it, but still didn't understand that it was delivered in malice, with malice. And so we wound up pulling him out of school in 7th grade in March at the school that he had been going to. And it was a traumatic time for all of us. And we got him into counseling because he had to work through that. I think, when I tried to talk to the administration about it, I asked them to do lessons with the students in the class. It wasn't a big middle school. He only had 28 kids in the whole 7th grade. They could have had some very directed conversations with the kids, but it just kept going on. And so I felt like I had to get him out of there, and I did.
Right, you had to do what's best.
Yeah, but it was traumatic for him. And he kept saying, "Mom, I don't think they meant it as being mean." And I said, "Brady, they did. They were being mean." And so that's had a profound impact on him. And It's interesting. I met a guy recently who started a company called KiND Lips, and it's actually a lip balm company.
Hmm.
And they donate 20% of their profits to anti-bullying curriculums that go into
Oh,
schools. And they teach
Good.
them, you're putting your kind lips on. Now let's use kind lips when we're talking to
right.
people, right? So
That's good.
I think that we're unfortunately still a long way, especially with like teenagers in that middle school, age group of, and it comes from the parents. I mean, obviously there are things that are being handed down to those kids, and there might be a
Yeah.
lot of pain in those kids' life too. And that's another thing that I tell Brady, that those kids that are being mean are probably going through some things of their own as well. But
Right.
unfortunately, I wish it wasn't something that we've experienced. And he's going into high school next year. He's in 8th grade right now. When we pulled him out, we put him into more of a homeschool hybrid type of a situation that's been really good for him this year. The kids are super sweet. There's a lot of kids on the spectrum in his class, and
Huh?
he's bonded with them. And but he's going into a more traditional high school next year. It's still a small school, but there's a lot of anxiety, especially that his dad and I feel, and I feel like we've still got a lot of work to do in communicating to kids, to parents, to employers, to everybody, that because somebody's brain works differently, because it takes Brady a little bit longer to respond when somebody asks him a question, because it takes him a little bit longer to process it. Or maybe he'll want to talk about movies more than the kid wants to talk about movies. That there is some level of understanding that that is a difference in him, just like somebody has curly hair instead of straight hair or something like that. And I,
Mhm.
I unfortunately
Right.
think we've still got a long way to go on that. As far as how we address it with Brady too, I think what goes back to identity again, and trying to remind him that he is fearfully and wonderfully made, and that he has the gifts and talents that were, placed in him to do good things. And that as life goes on, these kids are not going to, they're not going to matter. What matters is him staying true to who he is, and letting himself, share his gifts with other people, and just pray that the temperament and the hearts of people are changed as they encounter more people with invisible neurological differences. I mean, the numbers don't lie. Between autism and ADHD and every other neurological difference, it's like 20% of the population now. So
Hmm.
people are going to have to figure it out
Yeah,
because they're not going
exactly.
to be able to be in a room and not have somebody there whose brain works a little bit differently than theirs. So,
Right. So especially now, the awareness is at a key point where people
mhm.
need to know about all of this.
Right. Absolutely.
Hmm. Now,
Oh,
my next question. Oh, sorry, Ed.
no, you go. You go.
Okay. So my next question is, I understand that you guys have written a book together. Explain
Yes.
what you have done with that book and what he has done.
Yeah. So I started writing the book actually in about 2018, 2019. There was a gal in my Bible study who'd listened to all my stories, and she said, "You need to write a book." And so I sat down and I started writing. But at that point, Brady was, 6 or 7, 7, 8. And I was just writing about all the hard stuff that kind of went along with not being able to go down this typical parenting path that I had planned. Um, and so I kind of put it aside because I wasn't sure what message that was going to give to anybody other than a message that it was hard, and that wasn't the overall overriding message I wanted anybody to get from me being Brady's mom. So, but as my faith grew, as Brady grew, as we started to see kind of his personality emerge and all of these talents that he has, I just really felt like the message needed to be about not necessarily about being an autism mom, but about embracing the plan that God has for you when it's very different from the plan that you had for yourself. and then embracing who you are, and how you were created. And so, as we started to see Brady, especially when he was like 12 or 13, kind of take some of these risks and be successful with them, and just see the way the world was responding to him, and count all the blessings that we had, and instead of just lamenting all the differences in the way that our life went, then it really became clear to me that this needed to be a message to parents, to providers, to grandparents, to anybody that is really in contact with somebody who's neurodiverse, that you need to embrace them for who they are and celebrate them, and come to terms with the fact that we are not in control of our destinies, of our life. We can do our very best to plan every piece of our life, but we don't have the chops to make all of our plans come to fruition. so,
Right.
and then, Brady, we were sitting around, I was really kind of through most of the writing, and we were sitting at dinner one night and we were talking about the foreword, and Brady said, "What if I wrote the foreword?" And I said, "Well, let's give it a shot." And I will admit, like I talk about it in the book, I'm a control freak, and I admit that 100%. And so he left the table and he went to go write. And I'm thinking to myself, oh, what if it's horrible and I don't want to, use it, and I've already told
Right.
him. Well, he came and showed it to me, and it was perfect. And he's definitely got a gift for writing. He's super creative. And he was able to weave in all the different parts of him into that forward, and then really, reach out to other people who have neurodiversity, saying, look, just because you have autism or ADHD or anything else doesn't mean you can't do everything that you want to do. And
Right.
you have to know that you're fearfully and wonderfully made. And so it was this amazing encouragement that kind of kicked it off. And he has read the whole book. He's read it through it twice. And so he's read through some of the hard stuff. And he told me, Mom, now I understand better, kind of, the things that went on when I was a kid. And so it's been a really neat experience for the two of us to go. And, I couldn't take him to Atlanta with me, but I've had him with me at other events where we've been talking about the book. And oh my gosh, he's the best salesperson on the planet.
Yeah.
He walks out and walks up and introduces himself, and he's like, "You need to read my mom's book." And so I mean, he's on board, and I couldn't have done it if he wasn't.
Right.
One of the things that my two biggest things I pray about before I have any conversation is I need to honor God and I need to honor Brady. And if there are stories that he doesn't want me to tell, I don't tell him. And if there's things that happen in the moment, I always ask him, "Can I write about that?" And he'll be like, "Yes, you can write about it." So, he's been my partner in it, just right alongside me the whole way, which has just been really special.
What you said,
Awesome.
what you said brings up a good point to me. I've been to talks from people who know about autism, who, feel taught about it, and I get some things from it. Me and Shane have autism.
Right.
And I think that's what makes our talk special. We live it. We're not people who have learned about it, we live the experience. And I think people learn more from us because we have actually lived it. And I think they'll learn more from Brady because he's actually lived it. It's not secondhand from someone who's seen him and then, try to interpret that. It's his own words. And that's a beautiful thing that he can relate that.
Well, and I think I think it is so neat that there are more and more of your voices coming out and sharing that with people, and it's so important for Brady to hear that, for Brady to hear from people with autism that have lived all the different paths that they've lived on and know that all of these things are possible. And so I totally agree. One of I can't even remember if I wrote about this in the book, but when Brady finally had the language to explain some of the things that were going on with him, it was so powerful because one of the things, he could not have hot food, like temperature hot food. And everything had to be room temperature for him to eat. So I used to cook it and then I'd put it in the freezer for 5 minutes to get it back down to room temperature. And I remember one night I got frustrated with him because I pulled it out of the freezer and I gave him his chicken nuggets. And he said, Mom, this is still hot. And I said, Brady, it's not hot. It's lukewarm. Just eat it. And he looked at me and he goes, Mom, what is lukewarm to you is burning hot to me. And it was just this like, oh my gosh, you're right. I don't understand what it's like for you. And he was probably like 9 years old when that happened. And oh my gosh, that was just such an eye opener for me for everything that he was experiencing. So, yeah, I just love what you guys are doing. And the more we can get your voices out there and, not just encouraging other people with autism, but explaining it to people so they can understand what the world, how you experience the world, so they can be a better part of it with you. And I
Yeah.
think that's amazing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, I have the golden question for you, Kari.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. Since our group is named Hurdle, we like to ask everybody on our show, what is the biggest hurdle you have encountered through your entire journey?
Letting go of control as
Mm.
much as I can. I think personally that has been the hardest thing for me, but the best outcome for me. So, honestly, for the first few years after Brady was diagnosed, I was just trying to get us back to normal. I was trying to, run a million miles an hour and get him in as many therapies as I could. And I thought if I did that, I could just get us back on that traditional parenting path that I thought I was going to be on. And as long as I was holding on to that, I was never going to be able to embrace who he is. I was never going to even be able to embrace who I am now. I mean, I think about that control was keeping me from faith. That control was keeping me from loving Brady for exactly who he is. And, that control was making me try to march back towards a path. And when I look back now and I say, okay, once I released all that and I let go, I've always wanted to be this financial consultant because I thought finance was, the place to be. And all of a sudden I'm like, gosh, I just don't even like that very much anymore. And so letting go of that control that I thought I needed to have over my life is helped me change my entire trajectory of my life for how I parent Brady, to leaving the financial services world and starting KiND families, to growing in my faith. So I think, letting go of control and handing it over in my case, handing it to God, and for somebody else, maybe just handing it over to the fact that, the realization that you can't control all the things that are going to happen in your life, but you can control how you respond to them.
Right.
It's been huge. So,
Yeah, absolutely. So how do I word this properly? Do you think that there's enough faith and autism awareness out there, or do you think there needs to be more?
oh, I definitely think there needs to be more. Yeah, it's still a kind of mysterious term to a lot of people, I think, with autism. And I know, I mean, when we figured out that it was autism with Brady, I did not know a single person with autism. All I knew about were some kind of big scary stories or a movie or something like that. And so it frightened me. And I still think there's a big part of the population out there that has this understanding of autism that's just based in ignorance, like it was for me. So I think, I'm doing a webinar tonight with parents, and, we're kind of getting back to the basics of what autism is and how it can present itself. And that even though somebody with autism can speak and they can do all the things that you think are functional, it doesn't mean it's easy, and it
Right.
doesn't mean that there aren't still struggles. So I think that there is still a huge opportunity for growth and learning in autism. The thing that I've been, really digging into lately, which is so cool, is that there is so much faith in autism too. So I know my son has a tremendous faith, and I didn't know that that was possible with autism. I thought he needed to be so black and white and so concrete and have tangible evidence of everything to believe in something, and that's not true. And he actually, I think, in some ways, has a closer relationship to God than I do.
Oh, wow.
And I think there are growing. I have a dear friend who is also at the conference, who has a group called Raising Autistic Disciples. And it's really helping parents understand, like, the best thing you can do for your autistic child is to teach them about faith and let them grow in faith in their own way. And the stories that are coming from that are incredible, because there is, even for somebody who can't communicate verbally to other people around them, they have tremendous ability to communicate with their creator. And so I think that piece is just like, we've barely, the tip of the iceberg on that, which I think is super exciting too. But, everything you guys do, what we're trying to do in Kind Families, we've just got to keep doing it and, make it like, Brady asked me one time if he would be able to work in a normal job one day. And I said, well, I don't know that you'd want to work in a normal job, first of all. We got to find something that you want to do. But I told him, I said, Brady, in the 1950s and 60s, it was really weird for a woman to be in a managerial role. And,
Right.
And men probably had a hard time saying, how do I work with this woman in a constructive way? But over the years, because of the women that kind of flooded into the workplace, that's just kind of a normal thing now. And that's how I hope it is for neurodiversity. Like, it won't be an issue of how do I work with this person with autism. It'll just be like, oh, I work with this person and he has autism. And, there'll be no difference in relating, because we will be so used to it.
If he ever asks that again, if he ever asks that again, just give him the name Bill Gates. He has autism.
Exactly.
The actor Dan Aykroyd has autism.
Yeah.
He thinks Michael Jackson had autism.
Right. Right.
There are many famous people out there who have had it.
Yeah. And I know the creativity that Brady has. Like, I told you, he's starting to take pictures now, and he's taking pictures of things that look so mundane to me. And then he takes it and it's like, oh my gosh, how did you see that in this mundane little corner of a shopping mall, and he sees things that we don't see. And so that is, and I believe that is because of the way his brain works, and so I believe that absolutely, Ed, that you can do anything. So
Yeah, that's art at its best right there.
yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah.
I do have one final. Okay, I just have one quick final question. As the knowledge of autism grows throughout the United States, do you feel there are people out there who use autism as a crutch, as in they don't want to do the work because, oh, I'm autistic, I can't do that? How do you stop people from thinking that way?
I have honestly never met anybody with autism who has said that. Now, they might have asked for an accommodation to do something in a different way. And I think that's 100% okay. And I encourage my son, he doesn't want to use the accommodations that he's eligible to use in school a lot of times, because he just wants to be like everybody else. And I have to encourage him. But I encourage him to, if you need the quieter space, if you need, he doesn't need extra time on tests. I actually have to try to work with him to slow down because he tries to work so fast. But I have honestly never seen somebody with autism who was, and I'm thinking about one kid now where I'm taking that back, but it was because his parents did not get him diagnosed until he was older, and he just felt like he failed his whole life. And I think that was because he didn't know why things were harder for him, or why he had to do things differently for so long, that it just became, okay, that's why now I have autism and now I can't do that because I have autism. But I think the majority of people who have been in a supportive environment, who have been raised to know that autism isn't their identity, it's just a part of how their brain works. And, you know, I've never seen Brady use autism as a crutch. I've seen him say, it's too loud, I can't be in the room with a bunch of screaming teenagers. And that's okay. And so I think that, you know, the crutch word is, it's kind of a fine line to walk, because it's not, it's not an excuse. But if it's a request to do something differently because of the way your body reacts, or the way your brain works, that's not a crutch. So
Exactly. All right. We thank you for talking with us today.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Thankful. And I'm looking forward to having you guys on the Kind Families podcast. So hopefully sometime in the future here too. So thank you for all you guys are doing too.
Oh, thank you very much.
Yes, and thank you.
And to our YouTube viewers out there, if you like this interview, please remember, subscribe, like this video, look for notifications, and we're going to have many videos in the near future for you.
Awesome.
We can't wait. Thank you, Kari.
Thank you guys. Take care.
We'll talk soon. All right. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.